The presenting sponsor for OnEducation is Schoology. Every day, millions of students, parents, faculty, and administrators from more than 1,600 school districts leverage Schoology to advance what is possible in education. The team at Schoology is passionate about making its users successful, and they know sometimes you might need a little help to achieve your desired outcomes. To help districts find their way to success, Schoology has created Schoology Compass, a set of self-service resources and tools to support school and district leaders in their journey to success. Compass is made up of 5 district success routes. Each one is designed to advance what is possible at your district. To learn more about Schoology Compass, simply visit Schoology.com.
Just another segment of OnEducation. Lots of questions, no answers. Welcome to OnEducation. I'm Mike Washburn.
And I'm Glen Irvin. Friends, we have an awesome pod for you today. We will discuss whether old-fashioned toys are better than video games. Should we be concerned about our students' online privacy? Whether gamelets are better than games? And we have 3 interviews from the TICE conference to share.
Did you bring the table back with you?
I'll tell you right now, I'll be honest with you. I'm actually underneath my desk.
Are you really?
I didn't even tell you that.
No.
I decided it's the best. It's the best studio.
I think you figured it out.
Yes, I have a pillow kind of behind the microphone.
Yeah, you do.
There's a blanket kind of making a table cover kind of thing. So I'm basically insulated in a little studio underneath my desk. I have a nice desk that I put together. And I'm not even using it. I'm underneath.
You're underneath the desk. I think we need a picture of that. I think you need to get someone to take a picture.
I'll do a selfie of, or just my legs sticking out of it. Yeah, that'll be the funny one.
So I used to put the green. I have a really nice green screen, and it takes up so much room in my office is. I mean, it's not huge. It's probably about 8 by 10.
Sure.
So it's not a big room. It's an office size room. And I used to put a green screen right behind me.
Oh yeah.
And I used to leave it up all the time, but you couldn't walk around in the room because the green screen took up tons of space in the room. And I think what I've figured out is that I just needed more stuff in here. So after we renovated the room, right, we added a couch, and it has things on it, whatever, pillows and whatever, and we put furniture in here, and I find that the furniture is actually making the room sound better.
Oh yeah,
there's less empty,
right? Yeah, the echoey walls. Yep, that's what was happening here too. This is probably an 8 by 10 room, I would say. And
folks were figuring it out.
Yeah, I just figured out underneath the desk is the best place to record if you guys ever want to get a nice high quality sound. Underneath your desk, put blankets all over you, and then you've got your own studio.
Who needs a studio?
Who needs high quality sound foam boards? You just got blankets underneath your desk.
Blankets underneath the desk. Unbelievable. That's amazing. Listen, we have too much news, almost too many things to talk about.
Lots of things.
The title we always use for that first section of our podcast is quick hits, quick stuff, and there's nothing quick, or there shouldn't be anything quick about this, but we got to be quick because we don't want to keep you listening we know you won't listen forever, so but we do want to talk about a couple of things that came up. I guess this first one, old-fashioned games being better than and toys being better than video games, or electronic games. This article is interesting. I've had to read it a couple times because I was angry to start, which is my typical response
to things.
Right. And then, listen, we've talked about this a few times. We're of the age where we grew up in both of these worlds, or not grew up, but we've lived in both of these worlds. I don't know what you played with when you were a kid, but I played with Lego and building blocks and Tonka trucks and and was outside until 10 o'clock at night playing tag and whatever, and and my kids now, especially my oldest, plays on his Switch and plays Fortnite, and he plays with his friends, but it's like a totally different world. And I get what this article is saying. Obviously, we'll link all of these things in the show notes. I totally get that. And I agree that, and there's some sentences in this that are completely make sense. Things like how play is important for child development, and they start to learn best, about the world from playing and interacting with people on a personal level. I 100% agree with that.
Yes.
If I disagreed with that, my wife would be kicking my ass right now, because that's literally how she's made her living. Is by talking about play and, believing in kindergarten as a place to be formative in that place. So,
yes.
So,
yeah, I mean, I think that it states some very important factors that kids should be playing with other kids, and they should be playing in kind of that same way, what you talked about, kind of an old school kind of way, whether it be inventing your own games out of your, fantasy type games, and working together towards whatever, or running around in your yards, or I used to play, whatever sports outside. But then there's also, I think, definitely a space for digital games, and that's not a bad thing, because this thing says, it's basically saying that they're bad for you, and I don't know about that. Yes.
Well, it basically says, and this is actually completely counter to what I actually think of. Clearly, they're playing the wrong games, because it talks about them being static and not requiring you to think and have the same level of creativity.
Yeah, the games
and all of that is garbage. Yes. We know that that's garbage.
Yeah, the strategy and teamwork and cooperation, collaboration that it takes to be successful in almost all of the games that we know are the great games right now. Any game you talk about that's a great game right now, the reason why it's great is because it's multiplayer. It requires a high level of collaboration, cooperation. You can't just do it by yourself most of the time, most of these things.
Right.
You have a thing, and you have to learn. There's a ton of things, tons of strategy and whatever else to maybe to things. And this says it's all about memorization and targets memory skills. It's like, I don't know what games those are, but those aren't the games that our kids are playing and that we, are excited about.
Well, okay. So, we're almost having the exact same discussion on a group that you and I are both a part of. And it's talking about the difference between these garbage games.
Yes.
And that are being tagged as educational, that are static and do focus on memorization and are pretty much terrible.
It leads us to that next article, Mike, about the Pearson and those companies. They're all about wanting those kind of what they consider to be called gamelets, which actually are just trash games. That's what they really are. They're not
100%.
Yeah, they're not collaborative. They're not cooperative. They are static, and they're like the old school horrible games that maybe we used to see, on the old Apple IIe. That wasn't that interactive, wasn't that interesting, but it was kind of a game element, so you played it anyway.
Totally. And this article got linked in a Twitter conversation that Stephen Isaacs started, basically about how offensive some of these crappy games are that get smashed into VR or whatever, that have no business, just like these games that get smashed into education and are basically terrible.
Yes.
And then this article gets linked about, some dude from McGraw-Hill saying that small games are the way of the future. And of course he thinks that small games are the way of the future, because those are the ones that they can make.
Yes.
I don't know who this guy thinks we are, but he thinks that at least some people, and certainly the people buying textbooks, are idiots. Because, anyone who knows about games and learning knows that this is a business. This is just as much a business play for them as it is about education. Of course, he wants small games because he wants to put them on a DVD.
Yes.
So that he can, glue them to the back of a textbook cover and then say, hey, look, we are, we're hip.
We're gamified. Yes.
Right. We know what the kids like. The kids like games. So here's some games for you to play. They only take you 5 minutes, and here's all the great Common Core standards that they align to. And here's the pages in our textbook that they reference.
Yes. Play
these games because they're awesome.
Yeah. No.
When in reality, they're crap.
Oh, yeah. They're horrible. And your kids will hate them, too. I mean, it's not like we're just saying that they're bad. It's just they're just going to be not very good games. They're not going to be engaging. They're not going to be cooperative, collaborative. And you can call it a game all you want, but really it's not really anything better than, a worksheet.
It's not anything better than a worksheet. Yeah. Flat out. And he basically like calls out the teacher gamings of the world and stuff like that, and says that it's hubris. He actually said that word, which is stupid, but yeah. He says it's hubris for these gaming companies to think that they are the center of the classroom. He's basically doing the stay in your lane of education, right? Yes. He's like, listen, we're the textbook company. You guys need to, check yourself, because we are the center of the classroom still. It's basically what he's saying. It's exactly what he's saying. So, to talk about hubris, right?
Yeah. Just keep thinking that way. We'll see how soon you're not there anymore.
I tell you, the people on our side are a lot stronger than the people on their side, in the ways that it matters.
Exactly.
And, I think that we'll win eventually. So speaking of, people on strong sides, I guess this last article that we came across this week is really, really, really interesting. It's about privacy.
Yes.
And I guess we've talked about this before.
Yeah, we have.
And about, the big, the Apples and the Facebooks and the Googles and, how much they're integrated into education, and, what data is being generated off of, our students, off of our kids' information.
Yes. Because
they're using things like Chromebooks, and Google Docs. Mm-hmm. And there's so many interesting quotes here. And I guess before I'm going to actually read these quotes, because I think that I have some opinions, and they might be a little bit hot takey, but whatever. It's a podcast. Right. But, so there's a few of these quotes in this New York Times article that was linked to us by a listener, and it's super interesting. So here's a quote. It says, quote, similarly, parents are concerned about the dispensation of financial awards, including scholarships that are influenced by data that children have provided in surveys. In some cases, the information doesn't include just things like grades and test scores, but also covers categories like race, religion, address, and whether they have impairments like HIV or depression. That is a huge bag of complications in and of itself, right?
Yes. That's strange. That's one of the things that they brought into the argument is scholarship applications that include other categories like race, religion, and other things, disabilities or whatever it might be.
So listen, this is complicated, but they have to, in some cases, check on your background, especially, I'll tell you, the more prestigious the university, the more important the scholarship, the more they have to check on this. And the point I wrote in the notes is probably the most extreme of these points, but it's the first one that came to mind. And that's what if one of these idiot kids who, threw up the Nazi salute in that Wisconsin high school picture had straight A's, had 99% average, and got a scholarship, right, to Harvard, to Yale. And that got out because Yale didn't check things like, the internet to see if and correlate them to this picture. The outcry that this would generate would be deafening, absolutely monstrous. They have to do some of this. I mean, obviously, I think it's ridiculous that they would, base any sort of scholarship or award or dispensation related to things like depression or HIV. I mean, race, religion, other than, for I don't know what else to say, affirmative action type deals, where they're trying to just level the playing field. I mean, that's why, it's funny, as a Canadian, I've had this conversation recently with a few people, because we don't talk about race in education as much as Americans do, like hardly at all, in fact. But you guys have data on all of that stuff. Like, from experts and from information and data, what the average outcome level percentage, whatever, of Black people versus white kids in a certain neighborhood is. Sure. And then how that correlates to their income level. Yep. I don't know if we do that sort of thing.
Well, it's super important here because of the just crazy history amounts of differences between, for example, just at a small scale, funding in those schools that we've talked about before. How different the funding is for in a richer neighborhood because of property taxes that ends up funding the schools better, which in turn turns out to be better schools, better teachers, better results. And then the opposite happens in low income neighborhoods where you're not going to have these big property tax bases. And so their education is therefore lessened, usually significantly. Their opportunities are lessened then too. So generating that data, well, we have such a history though, too, Micah, as far as, it's not a good history as far as racial divides is the best way to be able to describe it. And because of that, it's important to continue to go ahead and track that to say, hey, are we making strides towards achievement gaps, for example? Are we actually doing anything significant? So those kind of things, those conversations, for example, about achievement gaps or funding, it's just super important. And really, we want to believe that we've made a lot of strides, and we have, but in a way we continue to go backwards sometimes. It's like it totally is a pendulum of swing where all of a sudden you think, hey, we're headed really in the right direction. And then all of a sudden it swings back exactly in the opposite direction. And you're like, gosh, we're back where we started, and we're back fighting for, just basic rights like education or whatever it might be.
And the thing is that, I mean, so this article talks about a lot about like the data that's being gathered by different, places and things like the Facebook, funded a personalized learning education tool called the Summit. And they've been criticized for parents providing consent to share their children's data.
Yes.
But I mean, how do you know if it's effective if you don't have the baseline information that you would typically need in the analysis of results?
Yeah. But it is Facebook, so people are paranoid.
Right.
So
that's why this is so complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated too. I mean, it's hard to trust big corporations to do the right thing, because all of our data that we give to them willingly, I'm not even talking about our students, but all of us that we give to these companies willingly, is partially because we want to use their products for free or whatever it might be, because Facebook is free, and so is Google and Gmail and Google Docs, and all of those things are wonderful, but there is a cost to that. And so how far do they go as far as the data mining and making, kind of basically pigeonhole us into, the old is Google listening experiments that people do,
I turned off my Facebook ad blocker recently just for fun.
Yeah.
I wanted to see
what targeted ads,
what kind of ads I was being served. And I've been paying attention to it for a few months, probably since, the early fall. And so in the early fall, mid fall, I bought a computer desk chair.
Yeah.
I needed a new chair. My chair, you would know this because it was a podcast issue. My chair was making noise when I was sitting in it. So I had to actually have a second chair in my office that I would sit on just when I was recording the podcast. So now I sit in a nice chair again. But I was researching what chair to buy. And I found that all of my Facebook ads all of a sudden became gaming, chair companies,
gaming chairs,
and which was fine for a while until I, bought one, and then I was like, okay, I'm done with this now. But what was really funny was just last week.
Okay.
I was literally just having a conversation on someone's wall with a good friend of mine, who has a food box, like a Blue Apron, the Canadian version of Blue Apron, basically. Yeah. And she had like a free week or whatever. And I was asking, if she liked it and what she thought about it and stuff like that. And she had a free week's, coupon code or whatever to offer. And so I took her up on that, but we were having a conversation, and literally 10 minutes later, when I opened Facebook, I was getting ads for all of the food subscription boxes that were available everywhere.
So then, it's freaky, and especially when
it was pulling it off the conversation from like the wall. It wasn't even like a Google search. Mm-hmm. It was literally me just talking on her wall, like on her Facebook page with her. And it pulled all of that information. And I get that this is happening. Mm-hmm. I get it. And I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. At least I'm being served ads about things I'm interested in instead of, knitting, I suppose. Are you into knitting, Glenn?
No, not really. But no? It's like an interesting question on as far as our students are concerned, and the apps that we end up using as far as in our classrooms. And it's something that we all should be having a conversation about, and really asking these big companies, like, what are you doing with this? And what can you guarantee us that you won't do with this information about our students? Like I wrote down in our notes about Flipgrid and Microsoft. So Flipgrid,
it's a good one.
Flipgrid used to cost money, everybody. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was just a few months ago.
Back in the day.
Yep. And when they got bought by Microsoft, all of a sudden Flipgrid is free. The reason why they told us it was free is because they want to drive more customers to the Microsoft
Office
suite of tools, all of their awesome Microsoft things. So if you believe that story, that's great. If that's that's the story that they're selling us. But just imagine what all of the things that Flipgrid collects on their little videos that they have. You're talking about facial recognition, students' voice, the things that students are interested and passionate about. All of that stuff can be data mined by a computer, a series of computers, and pulled out, extrapolated, and then they can target whatever they want to target, towards our students, whether it be just products, or if it's something, if you want to go conspiracy, it could be something more malicious. You know what I mean? But it's like
how much
there is a big
database somewhere.
And how much do you want? I mean, basically, it's okay to ask them that question. It's like, will you guarantee that this information, is not being sold, for example, to somebody else who wants all of that to do something else, and that something else could be anything. So it's a tough one, because all of us want to use these products and we want them to be free. Mm-hmm. But yet you are giving something up.
Listen, until the penalties for betraying our trust are higher than the rewards for doing it,
yes,
you're never going to get a promise from Google or Facebook or Apple or Microsoft that our data can be trusted with them.
I know. It's crazy.
And that's the reality of the situation. It has to be so prohibitive to them to screw with our information that it would ruin them as a company to, like, how many times has Facebook leaked our data now? Like I think I just saw something about pictures being leaked just like yesterday or whatever. I was pretty sick the last couple of days, but I just saw an article about Facebook leaking something about photos.
Yes.
And it's like, how many times should they be allowed to do this before they get in really big trouble? I don't know.
I know, man.
Hey, just another segment of OnEducation. Lots of questions, no answers.
That's the truth.
and that's exactly how we're going to wrap it up. So when we come back, we're going to talk about ties, the conference Glen just came back to, and wrap it all up.
OnEducation is brought to you by Classcraft. Classcraft is an amazing teaching resource created by teachers. Classcraft is dedicated to making school relevant and engaging to all of our students. Classcraft is proud to announce their Questathon quests created with shared storylines and custom illustrations to bring any subject to life. Every time a teacher downloads one of the free quests, Classcraft will add $1 to the Teachers Are Professionals Fund, which will be used to fund teacher requests to pledgesense.com. To learn more about Classcraft, simply go to classcraft.com.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. So ties just wrapped up this week, Glen.
Yes, it was amazing.
In beautiful, I assume I've never been there, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Is it beautiful?
It is beautiful. I mean, it's a really nice, easy to travel through city. Like very peaceful.
Well, that sounds
very
nice.
Peaceful. Like, in other words, if you are just walking down the streets late at night, not a big deal.
You feel safe.
It's very safe, very, very peaceful. Lots of great people. And we were in downtown Minneapolis. It was fantastic.
Awesome. Downtown Minneapolis, home of ties, featuring Glen Irvin. So you were everywhere.
I was everywhere. It was pretty fun. It was a fantastic ties. I think this is like the 7th time I've been there, and it never gets old. It's just for having, a couple thousand people at it, it feels very intimate, very like you can pretty much talk to anybody. It doesn't feel rush. And a couple thousand is still pretty good, as far as attendance wise. And they bring fantastic speakers and other featured presenters. So they just do a good job of bringing the right people, right messages, and it was just a great conference overall.
So who were the keynotes? Who were they?
So the first day keynote speaker was Jamie Kossip, or Jaime Kossip, as he called himself then too. And Jamie is basically one of the top education gurus at Google. He's also has all kinds of other accolades that are just amazing things. He's started a school for minority students. It's a public school for minority students. And it is all about coding. And it's in the Phoenix area, where I believe he lives in the Phoenix area. And they've basically broken all of the school stereotypes, I want to call it, So there's no grading. They basically have destroyed all of those things, and they have all these growing pains, but he's all excited about them. You know what I mean? So because they've decided to kind of go in a completely opposite direction of where most education systems are at in the United States, they do have some growing pains, but he's like, this is great. This is how you reconstruct the system, and then you make a model for other schools to be able to follow. So he's a big funder in that. So he's the creator of it. So I'm pretty sure he put his own money into it also.
Nice.
Yeah. And just a whole bunch of other awesome projects for minority students, especially Latino students. And he's just a great mind, fantastic speaker, just hilarious, very chilled out and relaxed. He wore jeans up there, so it's very interesting. When you see someone go up with jeans and like just a casual sweatshirt kind of thing going, that
that's what I want to do.
That the message that they're going to bring is going to be awesome. It's probably something really, really awesome, and that they're chilled and relaxed.
Right.
They're not going to be wearing it
Right.
or whatever. But he did show us some pictures of him presenting to President Obama and Michelle Obama at the White House, and he said it was one of the first times that he had a suit on, and all of his friends freaked out, not because he was in the White House, but because he had a suit on. So no, he's definitely a nationwide and worldwide speaker, and just a fantastic message.
Cool.
Yeah. So
and the other
second day we had Kimberly Bryant, and she is the creator or co-creator of Black Girls Code, and her message and her keynote was super powerful. I mean, it had just some very powerful stories of both her daughter and her friends, and then other girls who are of the African American community who have just done amazing things with coding and received all kinds of accolades. And by coding, I mean they've created apps to help, for example, homeless people to find food shelters. Just all this kind of just amazing kind of things to connect people that, for example, live in inner cities to good food. You know how that's a big problem, as far as fresh food.
Sure.
I don't know what they call it, like deserts, like city deserts or food deserts, where the only thing that they can get is processed food, And so they saw these problems, and there's these kids. I mean, I'm talking about 11 and 12-year-old kids. They see these problems, and they actually are inventing solutions to those problems and putting them out there for people to be able to use. So she told these powerful stories of that, powerful stories of kind of some tragedies that have happened in these inner cities, and then how they've pushed through these tragedies and then made wonderful things happen, because even though these things kind of were there as barriers, still pushed through the barriers, and then were able to go in and succeed at the end. So great message by Kimberly Bryant also. And the website, blackgirlscode.com, I believe that's what it is a fantastic.
Let's put that in the show notes.
Make sure we put in the show notes, and just a fantastic program for our African-American students, but also any of our minority students, to make sure that we get them involved in computer sciences. Oh, and you know what, Mike, you would have loved this.
Of course.
I changed my mind about something. I just thought of this right now. So I heard Jamie Cossip talk and Kimberly Bryant, and actually kind of the tone of the entire conference was, there was one part where basically we were talking about how there's all of these jobs just in Minnesota that are of the computer science field, basically of coding, right? And they're all unfilled. Mm-hmm. And we talked about how many graduates are graduating from those degree areas in Minnesota. And it was probably, I'm going to get these numbers wrong, but it's something like this. We're probably graduating 100 to 200 students that are in these fields, right?
Yeah.
And there's like 15,000 jobs opened. And the starting salary for those jobs in Minnesota, which 100,000. So like, and in Minnesota, if you make 100,000 to start your career,
you're loaded. You're top of the world.
Pretty well. Let's just say that.
Yeah,
you're going to live a very upper middle class kind of existence. It's going to be a good life, a good start to your career. And anyway, they were talking about that's just in Minnesota. And Jamie Casa brought up this little piece of paper. He just wrote it down. He goes, I'm not criticizing any of you guys, but I'm just telling you that this is the truth. And he started naming out the statistics. And basically all of us looked around to each other. We don't have a solution for that yet. You know what I mean? We're not solving that problem right now. We don't have students going into these fields and inspiring them to go ahead and take these jobs. So these jobs are sitting vacant, or we're letting outside entities, whether they be from other states or from other countries, to take these jobs. You know what I mean? To other people. 100%. So I changed my mind about that coding thing. So I've really talked to my school and and already started having conversations about, shouldn't we be starting, at the lower grade levels, kind of like what you were doing, which was inspiring students to go ahead and just play around with coding and do it in a fun way, where maybe you're creating a game and you're doing some things, you're doing that kind of a design process. But then at the high school level, start giving some kids some pathways towards those fields, so that by the time they graduate, they've already been exposed to Python and different coding languages, and they're already excited about it. And now they're ready to go ahead and do that 4-year or 2-year, 4-year program, so that they could enter the world of work, and they have all of these opportunities. They can pick where they want to work, and get paid really, really well for it. So definitely inspired to go out and start doing something about this. I won't be the person teaching those courses, but I think we need to start figuring out how are we going to make that pathway exist, because that pathway is there right now. We need to get our kids into those fields. So, yeah.
And imagine a United States of America where there were 200, because the numbers, we know what the numbers are. If you say it's 15,000 just in the, the Minnesota, region, it's in the hundreds of thousands. Yes. Imagine an American economy, an American jobs landscape where there were 250,000 to 500,000 more people earning $100,000 or more a year.
I mean, talk about everything. Tax bases, purchase power, donations to charities. I mean, all of that stuff is super important. We need to make those pathways exist, right? And inspire our kids, especially our minority students and our girls, and say, hey, you can do any of this stuff, and check out what you can do with it. And if they're inspired to do that, we need to give them a pathway towards being able to go in and be successful in those jobs. Because they exist right now, man. I was 100,000 to start. That's crazy.
Like, if that doesn't make the case for like an idea about like trickle up kind of economics, where you grow people, you build people up, and they build up the economy, nothing would. I mean, 250,000 to 500,000 more people who earn $100,000 or more a year doesn't just give those people money. It builds up businesses and infrastructure, and it leads to new advancements in research and things that we can't even possibly imagine.
We don't even know yet. Exactly. Yes.
And
so, yeah.
So, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer
Big
to
time,
me.
man. I was super pumped about it, and then I was also like, okay, I get Mike's message. So from a few podcasts ago, when I was arguing against coding, I changed my mind. And it was all because of Jamie Cossip and Kimberly Bryant, because they inspired me. I was like, okay, this is real. This is where we need to go.
Awesome. Welcome to
the other side.
Other side, I guess.
Yeah.
So it sounds like Ties was a success.
Check out the name. I mean, Sarah Thomas was there. She just came in and out just to, our friend from the podcast here. Sarah Thomas was there. Mandy Frelick was there. She's super awesome teacher, educational leader, and then also author. Of course, Angie, we actually had her on the show just this last week. The interviews are going to include Jessie Buetow, who's a Schoology Educator of the Year, and Jennifer Casa Todd. I interviewed her. She's one of the pre-conference keynote speakers, and she's from your area. Yes, she's from Ontario. She wrote a book called Social Media. She's a teacher librarian in Ontario, Canada. And I was trying to remember who was my final interview, and I can't think of it right now, but I know who it is. I got a representative and a friend from Seesaw, the company Seesaw. One of the biggest things I heard about at this conference was that product. So I was like, okay, if everybody's talking about Seesaw, we got to talk to someone that represents Seesaw too. So I got one of my friends who's also, I think
like a Seesaw ambassador.
She's a regional. She works for them now. She used to be a kindergarten teacher for a long time. Okay. And she actually had come to my school as an ambassador kind of thing to do trainings. And then now she actually works for them. So you'll be hearing her interview too. Yes.
Cool. So we're gonna play you some interviews that Glen had at Ties. Before we do that, I guess we should make a minor note to everyone that we're gonna take next week off. So we record on Sundays. This is the 16th of December, so we're not gonna record on the 23rd. We're gonna take that week off. We're gonna give us and the boys in Rochester the week to be with their families and enjoy Christmas holidays. We'll be back on recording on the 30th, and we basically have guests, Glenn, lined up right all the way to FETC at this point.
So,
and then we'll be in beautiful Orlando in January, the end of January. So wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays and all of that stuff.
You guys are amazing. Thank you for listening and sharing the podcast.
Yeah, I'll tell you, this has been a hell of a year. It's been, we were talking about it before we hit record, but boy, oh boy, what a weird experience this has been. Yeah, totally. So thanks, and we're really looking forward to whatever's going to happen in 2019. Woo! For sure. So stay tuned. When we come back, we will have back to back interviews with folks that Glen spoke to at Ties. Stay tuned.
OnEducation is brought to you by Audible.
So I got to tell you about this book. So I'm reading a book called You Can't Spell America Without Me. It's written by Alec Baldwin. And it's in Trump's vernacular. Like, it's in his voice. Like, it's like as if it was written by Donald Trump. Okay. And so I'm reading it, and I'm thinking, every time I'm reading it, I'm hearing Donald Trump's voice reading it to me. So I looked up on Audible if it was there, and I'm telling you, it's there. Oh, so this is Alec Baldwin in the voice of Donald Trump reading the book You Can't Spell America Without Me. You've gotta listen to this. It is an absolute nightmare of a book. It's hysterical. So all that you guys have to do to listen to You Can't Spell America Without Me is go to audibletrial.com/oneducation. That's audibletrial.com/oneducation. And you will get a free audiobook download, which you should totally use for You Can't Spell America Without Me by Alec Baldwin, read to you by Alec Baldwin in the voice of Donald Trump. There's nothing better. So go do that, like, right now.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm sitting here actually in a lobby at Ties 18 with a beautiful fireplace and what looks like a sleigh in front of us. And I'm sitting here with Jesse Buetow from St. Paul Public Schools. Jesse, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, my name's Jesse Buetow, and I'm a 4th-5 grade teacher, split classroom in St. Paul Schools. I teach at Randolph Heights Elementary.
Perfect. And I just attended a session with Jesse. I wanted to make sure we've had you actually on the show.
Yes.
But our interview got corrupted at Schoology Next. And so the way that it recorded, what you were just talking about, podcast, but we never got to publish that interview. So Jesse actually is a Schoology Educator of the Year of this current year, and an Apple Distinguished Educator also.
That's correct.
And this specific session was super interesting to me because it was about podcasting, about your students podcasting, and you have a split 4 or 5 grade class, and these students are telling these amazing, compelling stories through these podcasts. So kind of give our audience a flavor about how would they go about doing that, Jesse?
Sure. So we base our podcasts on sort of an NPR style, This American Life style podcast. So we call it This Fifth Grade Life.
Nice.
And really what it is it's about a chance for the kids to tell their family stories. So every family has a story that is really personal to them. It's that story that kind of gets told over and over at family gatherings and in their dinner tables. And you remember that one time, and the kids all go, oh, yeah. So what we want is the kids to have the opportunity to tell that story and to connect with their culture and connect with their family and connect with their history. And so this podcast series, really, each kid is responsible for an episode, and they, throughout the course of that episode, tell an important story that is important to their family.
What I found most compelling, 2 things. One is these kids the diversity of the stories that they're telling are incredible. Everything from a family member surviving chemotherapy or a certain type of cancer to World War II interviews of their grandparents.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of second generation immigrants as well. So we've got a lot of immigration stories. people telling their parents or their grandparents stories of coming to the United States. Some of them are really fairly traumatic, running through the jungles in Laos and things like that. So we run the gamut from really funny stories about, we got one where a couple toddlers steal an old pickup truck on a farm to things about, people running through the jungle afraid for their lives. So it really runs a wide range of stories, and they're all really powerful and amazing.
So the second part that I really loved is that you guys are using the iteration process as far as putting together the podcast. They bring in they basically pose an idea to you, right? They pitch an idea to you as a teacher, and you become kind of like the studio manager at a place and make sure that their pitch is strong enough to be able to go ahead and tell a really good story. Yeah,
I like to kind of look at it as I'm really shifting roles. I'm their teacher, but I'm also their editor. So they've got to pitch it to me. It's got to make sense. It's got to be a good story. And there's times where I'll say, this just isn't going to work. Let's keep digging. Let's find something else. And sometimes it's a matter of they're bringing me what they think is finished, and I'm like, that's great, but there's more things that we can do here. There's more editing, or I'm hearing you talking, your subject talking too much. Let's pull that back and let's have you talk more. It's your job to tell that story, not the person you're interviewing.
And it's so, your process, and we'll make sure we give their information to be able to access your website so that people can go ahead and check out the episodes. But the process by which you're going through is so powerful. I think it's basically a combination of the writing process, but then also doing it in a creative format through this podcasting.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really base it on what the pros do. I'm lucky enough to be... my brother makes podcasts for a living for American Public Media, so he and a couple other people have kind of walked me through the process so that I understand the process, and which is good because I would have had things backwards. I would have done things in the wrong order, and our podcast would not be as good. So I was able to take their process, break it down into kid-friendly steps, and add graphic organizers, add sort of checks for quality and those formative assessments, and then really turn it into a process that the kids can follow through.
So one of the most powerful things that you said, I think, in the session was at the end when you said, their final product, we all celebrate the final part. We listen to it together, and they've already been, critiqued and have, gotten feedback on it. And now by the end, when they produce this and show it off to the class, it's about the celebration.
It is. And it's about us listening to them together and celebrating each person's story. We put it, we call it a season. We've got 3 seasons so far. We're going to be doing season 4 this year. Each kid gets an episode. So, your season 4, episode 5, and we post them on our website. We put them out on Twitter. We really make it a production that the kids can feel proud of. That, you are a podcast maker. You're not just doing this project for me. It's about, the writing process doesn't necessarily have, the final product doesn't have to be writing. The writing process is the creation process, and so we go through that process of gathering ideas and making a plan and drafting and then revising and then finally publishing. But that publishing, just because it's a writing project, that publishing does not have to be written. It can be spoken. And in this case, they've written a script, and they will narrate that script, and they've spliced in pieces from their grandmother's story. But that publishing piece is a totally different thing, and that's really powerful.
It's awesome. So if our audience members want to get a hold of you or follow you on Twitter, what is it?
Yeah, so my Twitter handle is @Mr. Buetow. That's MRBUETOW. And then I also have one for my class, which is where I post most of the final episodes. So if you're looking for it this spring, we go under the hashtag This Fifth Grade Life. And then my class Twitter handle is @RHSDragon5B.
Okay, and the website, is it available for anybody to go ahead and visit?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So you can search, that's on our, so if you go to Randolph Heights, spps.randolphheights.org, that's our school website. You can find me on there. I'm under the 5th grade tab. And right on our webpage is this 5th grade life page, and in there is each season. Our goal is eventually to try to get ourselves into iTunes. We just haven't gotten that far yet.
Yeah,
so
we'll link it in the show notes because it's such powerful examples and all kinds of different things. Just the 2 that you showed us today, I was like, oh, this is so awesome and great things to go ahead and share. Thanks so much for being on the show, Jesse.
Thank you, Glenn.
So, welcome back, everyone. I'm here with Jennifer Casa Todd, a keynote speaker here at the TIES conference on Sunday evening. The presentations actually, or the main part of the TIES conference actually begins tomorrow. But Jennifer, can you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. Hi. Thank you for having me. My name is Jennifer Casa Todd, and I'm a teacher librarian in Aurora, Ontario, Canada. And for the record, it is warmer there than it is here in Minneapolis.
That's crazy.
Great. It is. You are more north here. But I've had just a great day. So in addition to being a full-time teacher librarian, I'm also the author of the book Social Media, and I do lots of other things. I'm a mentor teacher for the OnEd Student Chat, which is an Ontario student-led chat.
Very cool.
Where students are using social media to connect and learn. I love it. I'm a GEG Ontario leader, so Google Educator Group Ontario leader with some fabulous team members. And we just organized with a great team the first DigCit Institute in Ontario. So
that's fantastic. So I was looking at the title or some descriptions of your book, and there's a quote there that says, "We must educate, empower, and inspire our students to use social media and basically to learn and share our learning." So is that the premise of the book?
So absolutely. The premises of the book really is rooted in the idea of digital leadership, which George Couros actually defines as using the vast reach of technology and social media to improve the lives, well-being, circumstances of others.
Yes.
So the book really is about showcasing and celebrating students who are using social media to learn and share learning, but also to empower others and celebrate others, and to promote causes that are important to them, as well as to be a more positive influence on others. Each of the chapters in the book has a student vignette at the end. So I didn't want to appropriate the voices of students. They're actual voices of students.
Yes.
And I highlight and showcase kids who are leveraging social media for good.
That is fantastic. So we have listeners that are parents and that are obviously we have a lot of educators that listen to the podcast. And I would say a large majority of them are intimidated by social media in general, either their own use of it, but specifically our students' use of it or our own children's use of it. And so what kind of advice do you have for parents and teachers about how to switch that or turn that around and actually be able to use it for good?
So there's a great quote by William Dwyer, and he says, "When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change." And there have been so many experiences in my personal and professional life that have really shown me that we need to interrupt the current trajectory. Kids only look at social media for entertainment. They look at it as a place to, just put a comment without thinking of purpose or audience. And the only way I think we will change that is if we start to allow them to use these tools in school. And I know that even me as a mom, and I worked in a district role supporting teachers with technology, when even just the thought of social media with my own children caused fear in me. And I get that, but it becomes a very different place when you start to follow people who inspire you, people who are smarter than you, organizations that are promoting really amazing causes, when your child finds an affinity space, and so again, it really is about changing the way you look at things. These are very powerful computers kids have in their pockets. We are able to connect across the world.
Yes.
There's an initiative right now I'm involved in with my students, and we're connected with kids in Norway and Japan and Czechoslovakia. You can't do that without the use of some of these tools. And so that's why I think it's our moral imperative to show kids that they could use this differently.
Awesome. So if our audience members want to, we're going to make sure we give them a link to your book to be able to check it out. And then if they want to learn more about your work or anything that you're doing, where should they go to be able to find out more?
Okay, well, if you're at Ties, if you happen to be here, there are some books for sale here. Otherwise, I blog regularly at jcasatodd.com, and there's a contact form there. If you can't afford the book right now because it's Christmas time, I do have a bunch of free resources at socialmedia.org.
Nice.
And you're welcome to have a look at what's there. And reach out to me on Twitter at jcasatodd.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
So welcome back, everyone. I am super pumped here to be with Angela Gadtke from Seesaw. Angela, why don't you go to introduce yourself to our audience?
Hey, everyone. I'm Angela. I lead the community team at Seesaw, and I came to Seesaw from the classroom, actually. I was a kindergarten teacher for 15 years, loved using Seesaw, and I wanted to share it with all the teachers I could. So here I am at Seesaw spreading the word.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've noticed is I try to kind of dig into trends that are happening at conferences or the things that people are talking about. And so many people are talking about your product, Seesaw.
I know, right?
And I believe it's because it's an amazing, easy-to-use product. But can you tell, maybe we have audience members that aren't aware of the product and what it actually does.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about what Seesaw is?
Yeah, so Seesaw is a great student engagement platform. We kind of started as a digital portfolio, and we still have awesome components of that, but we have so many creative tools for students to really use and choose how they like to share their learning with larger audiences, whether that be their families, maybe it's just the teacher in their class that they're sharing their thinking with, but we have great creative tools that really allow them to, do things like record their voice or take a photo of something that they're doing in class and then explain their thinking. So it's also a great tool for teachers to really gain insight to what their students are thinking, because we always want to know that, right?
Yes.
And we wish we could have those one-on-one conversations with all of our students every day in the classroom, and I think Seesaw gives us kind of this edge of being able to do that and share all the learning that happens and all the other things that students are doing, whether they're using hands-on stuff or they're using other apps and digital tools. It can go to Seesaw and be shared.
So I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I came to a pre-conference workshop that you actually hosted. And I thought the most amazing part of this was that you only had like an iPad for like this kindergarten classroom or two, something like that, very limited
shared
amount.
Devices,
And then so you had to share devices, so you were still using this product in a super high level way, basically by using these stations.
Totally.
And then being able to go ahead and get those intimate moments with students see how well they're learning things, that you were sharing those moments with us. And that's when I knew, I was like, oh, okay, this is a very, very powerful learning tool.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that caught me right away with Seesaw was the fact that I didn't have one-to-one devices. I had, I think, 5 iPads that were shared with, 24 kindergartners, and I was working with kindergartners. And I think what's great about Seesaw, no matter what level of students you're working with, there's the tools in Seesaw, just the simple thing like I mentioned before, the photo, and being able to, with one tap of a button, record your voice, whether you're using Chromebooks or iPads or Kindles, that's huge.
Yes.
And, there's so many more layers that build onto that in Seesaw, but I think that was, for me, just a great way to bridge some of those gaps that exist in barriers that exist for students with different technologies or even just their abilities. I was working with pre-readers and pre-writers, and I thought, wow, this is huge for them. And I think also students in the upper elementary, there's some tools that they're using all the time, but they're missing some of those creative components that are available in Seesaw.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I'll get is another impressive part about Seesaw is that parent connection.
Yeah.
And I mean, that really caught me also, is that your parents instantaneously, with the use of the app or whatever they were actually on, could see what was happening during the school day. And it's such a critical component to making sure that they have that school connection. And so you have your parents, maybe even your grandparents, that are connecting to these students' accounts and being able to watch their learning and seeing what they're actually producing in school.
Well, and I think as teachers, we're always trying to find, we want that connection, right? That's, I think, in every teacher's philosophy, we really want to connect with the home parent connection and really make that relationship solid. And it's hard work, though.
Yes.
It's like you think back like, oh my gosh, we're sending emails, we're typing newsletters for an hour, we're doing all these things to connect, and now I can do that super easily, and it's coming from their kid.
Yes.
It's the student adding it, which is really cool. And I think the one thing, just to highlight too, is we have so many amazing teachers that are using Seesaw. Our community is phenomenal, and we really wanted to give space for that collaboration inside of Seesaw. So we actually have a feature called the Activity Library, where teachers that are already using Seesaw can actually share what they're doing and the successes that they're having, and you can actually share some of those activities with your students, which
Very
is really
nice.
cool.
Yeah, so you are actually learning from this community
Right,
of learners.
totally,
Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah, so if people want to learn more about Seesaw, what should they do?
So just go to our website, web.seesaw.me, and you can get started there. We have a great help center that's at help.seesaw.me, and you'll also find webinars that are free, live webinars that you can take, at home in your PJs at any time. And of course, we're on Twitter at Seesaw, on Instagram, Seesaw Learning, and we have awesome Seesaw teachers groups on Facebook. So I can go on and on. Our community's just all over.
Okay, we'll make sure we link up some of those
I know,
things.
that'd be great.
and do that. Thanks you so much for being with us today, Angela.
Love it. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to OnEducation. My name is Mike Washburn, and my co-host is Glen Irvin. Do you want to get in touch with us? Check out our website at oneducationpodcast.com. You can tweet us at oneducationpod. Glen is at IrvSpanish on Twitter. I can be found on Twitter at Mr. Washburn. Our engineers are Jake and Justin at Podcast Production Team. Check out their website at podcastproductionteam.com. You can find us on Facebook by visiting facebook.com/oneducationpod. If you're enjoying the show and think others would too, we'd be thrilled if you shared it with them. Please leave us a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or the Google Play Store. When you leave a rating, it gives our rankings a boost, and this helps others discover the show. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, Schoology, for supporting us. Check out Schoology.com to learn how they can help you advance what's possible. Thanks as always for listening. Stay awesome. See you soon.